Did you know that Family Guy has been running for so long that if you watched every episode back to back, you'd be sitting there for over 7 days straight without sleeping? And tonight, we're going to explore the deep, intricate lore of this animated universe in the most soothing way possible. So, grab your favorite blanket, get comfortable, and let me take you through the fascinating world of Quahog, Rhode Island, where nothing is quite what it seems on the surface. The Griffin family saga begins long before Peter Griffin ever graced our television screens. In the quiet suburban streets of Spooner Street, a complex web of relationships, histories, and mysteries has been weaving itself for decades. Tonight, we'll unravel these threads slowly and gently, allowing the rich tapestry of Family Guy's storytelling to wash over you like a warm, comfortable wave. Let's start our journey with the patriarch himself, Peter Griffin. Born in 1956, Peter's origin story is far more complex than his simple-minded exterior might suggest. His biological father, Mickey McFinnigan, was an Irish fighter pilot who had a brief romance with Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin, during World War II. This revelation, discovered much later in the series, adds layers to Peter's character that extend far beyond his love of beer and television. Growing up in Providence, Rhode Island, Peter's childhood was marked by the influence of his stepfather, Francis Griffin, a deeply religious man whose stern demeanor shaped much of Peter's rebellious adult personality. The tension between Peter's carefree nature and his stepfather's rigid expectations created psychological patterns that would follow him throughout his life, manifesting in his relationships with authority figures and his own parenting style. The Griffin family home at 31 Spooner Street holds secrets within its walls that span generations. Built in the 1940s, the house has witnessed decades of Quahog's evolution from a quiet fishing village to the bustling suburban community we know today. Each room tells a story, from the basement where Peter keeps his various collections and hiding spots, to the attic, where family memories gather dust alongside forgotten treasures. Lois Griffin brings her own rich family history to the Griffin legacy. Born into the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, her upbringing in Newport, Rhode Island, was marked by privilege and expectations that she would eventually rebel against by marrying Peter. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money aristocracy, while her mother, Barbara, embodies the socialite lifestyle that Lois chose to leave behind for suburban family life. The love story between Peter and Lois began in the most unlikely circumstances. Their first meeting at a college party seemed destined for disaster, with Peter's crude humor clashing against Lois's refined sensibilities. Yet beneath the surface differences, they found a connection that would withstand decades of marriage, countless adventures, and the chaos that seems to follow the Griffin family wherever they go. Their eldest child, Meg Griffin, carries the weight of being the family scapegoat, but her character development reveals depths that extend far beyond the surface-level jokes. Born Megatron Griffin, her name itself hints at the complex relationship she has with power and identity. Throughout the series, glimpses of Meg's inner strength emerge, suggesting that her current role in the family dynamic may be more temporary than it appears. Chris Griffin, the middle child, represents the gentle heart of the Griffin family. His artistic nature and kind spirit often serve as a counterbalance to the chaos surrounding him. His relationship with his imaginary friend and his various creative pursuits reveal a sensitive soul navigating the complexities of adolescence while surrounded by the unconventional family dynamics that define the Griffin household. The youngest Griffin, Stewie, presents perhaps the most intriguing mystery in the entire series. His advanced intelligence, sophisticated vocabulary, and mysterious origins create questions that have puzzled fans for years. Some episodes suggest he's a genius infant, others hint at time travel capabilities, and still others present him as an ordinary baby whose adventures might exist primarily in his imagination. Brian Griffin, the family's talking dog, serves as both comic relief and philosophical anchor for the series. His role as the most rational member of the family often puts him in the position of voice of reason, though his own flaws and struggles with alcoholism and failed relationships make him a complex character rather than a simple moral compass. The extended Griffin family tree branches out in fascinating directions. Peter's sister, Karen, and his various relatives create a network of relationships that span different social classes and geographic regions. Each family gathering reveals new dynamics and old resentments that have been simmering beneath the surface for decades. Quahog itself functions almost as a character in the Family Guy universe. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own history, complete with founding families, local legends, and community traditions that date back centuries. The Drunken Clam, Peter's favorite bar, serves as more than just a drinking establishment. It's a social hub where local politics, gossip, and friendships are forged and tested. The town's various establishments each carry their own stories. The grocery store where Peter works has seen multiple ownership changes and corporate restructures, reflecting broader economic changes in small-town America. The local news station provides a window into Quahog's relationship with the outside world, while the various restaurants and shops create a sense of community continuity. Among Quahog's most colorful residents, we find characters whose backstories interweave with the Griffin family narrative in unexpected ways. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffin's neighbor, carries secrets from his past as a naval officer and pilot that occasionally surface to add depth to his character beyond his more obvious personality traits. His family history, including his relationship with his parents and his various romantic entanglements, creates ripple effects throughout the community. Cleveland Brown's departure and eventual return to Quahog represents one of the series' most significant character developments. His journey to Virginia and back again brought new perspectives to old friendships, while his marriage to Donna and the blending of their families created new dynamics in the established social order of Spooner Street. Joe Swanson's background as a police officer adds layers of law enforcement history to the neighborhood dynamic. His disability, acquired in the line of duty, represents both personal triumph and ongoing challenge, while his relationship with his wife Bonnie and their family creates another thread in the complex web of Spooner Street relationships. The recurring characters who populate Quahog each bring their own histories and motivations to the community. Mayor Adam West's eccentric leadership style masks a deeper commitment to his town, while his bizarre decisions often reveal unexpected wisdom. Dr. Hartman's medical practice serves the community despite his questionable competence, and his interactions with the Griffin family often provide insights into the town's healthcare system and social services. The series' approach to continuity creates interesting challenges for understanding Family Guy lore. Some episodes exist in their own bubble, while others build upon previous storylines or reference past events. This flexible approach to storytelling allows for both standalone adventures and deeper character development, creating a rich tapestry of experiences that can be appreciated on multiple levels. Religious and deeper, spiritual themes weave throughout Family Guy's narrative structure. Peter's complicated relationship with faith, influenced by his Catholic upbringing and his current skepticism, creates ongoing tension with his stepfather's devout beliefs. Lois's more moderate approach to spirituality provides balance, while the children navigate their own relationships with religious concepts and community expectations. The economic realities of the Griffin family life reflect broader American middle-class experiences. Peter's various jobs and career changes mirror the instability many families face in changing economic conditions, while Lois's occasional work outside the home represents the increasing necessity for dual-income households in suburban communities. Educational themes emerge through the children's school experiences at James Woods High School. The various teachers, administrators, and fellow students create a microcosm of American public education, complete with funding challenges, administrative politics, and the ongoing struggle to provide quality education in an underfunded system. Transportation plays a significant role in Family Guy lore, from Peter's various vehicles to the family's travel adventures. Each mode of transportation represents different aspects of American mobility culture, from the freedom of car ownership to the challenges of public transportation and the dreams of exotic travel destinations. The series' treatment of technology evolution provides a unique window into changing American society. Early episodes reflect the technology available at the time, while later episodes incorporate smartphones, social media, and digital culture into the storylines, creating interesting contrasts in how the characters adapt to technological change. Food culture permeates Family Guy storytelling, from Peter's love of unhealthy cuisine to the family's dining experiences at various restaurants. These food-related storylines often reflect broader American attitudes toward nutrition, dining culture, and the role of food in family bonding and social interaction. The changing seasons in Quahog provide natural rhythm to the series' storytelling. Holiday episodes create opportunities for family traditions, while seasonal activities reflect the natural cycle of New England life. These seasonal elements ground the fantastic elements of the show in recognizable patterns of American suburban life. As we reach the end of our gentle journey through Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that this animated universe continues to evolve and expand. New episodes add fresh layers to established characters while introducing new elements to the community of Quahog. The ongoing nature of the series means that tonight's exploration represents just one moment in a continuously growing tapestry of storytelling. The Griffin family's adventures, both mundane and extraordinary, reflect universal themes of family, community, and personal growth, wrapped in the distinctive comedic style that has made Family Guy a cultural phenomenon. Whether dealing with everyday suburban challenges or embarking on impossible adventures, the characters of Quahog remind us that family bonds, friendship, and community connections provide the foundation for navigating life's complexities. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, let the gentle chaos of Spooner Street fade into peaceful dreams, knowing that tomorrow will bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities for the Griffin family and their neighbors to discover what it truly means to be part of something larger than themselves in the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget, it was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth MacFarlane is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature MacFarlane's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. MacFarlane has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight MacFarlane's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. MacFarlane has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore next? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Have you ever wondered what happens when your favorite animated characters don't just get blown up for laughs, but actually stay dead? Well, grab a cup of warm milk and get comfortable, because tonight we're diving deep into the surprisingly dark world of Family Guy's permanently deceased characters. And trust me, some of these deaths will shock you more than Peter's latest workplace accident. Now, before we start counting bodies, let's be real about something. Family Guy isn't exactly known for its restraint when it comes to cartoon violence. Characters get flattened, exploded, and dismembered on a weekly basis only to magically appear in the next scene like nothing happened. But every once in a while, the Grim Reaper actually keeps his receipts, and these characters never bounce back. Some were killed because fans couldn't stand them, others because their voice actors passed away in real life, and a few just got caught in the crossfire of Seth MacFarlane's twisted sense of humor. So dim those lights, settle into your most comfortable position, and let's explore every character that Family Guy has permanently sent to the great cartoon afterlife. Starting with the very first casualty that taught us this show wasn't messing around when it came to consequences. Our journey begins with Mr. Weed, Peter's original boss at the happy-go-lucky toy factory. This man first graced our screens way back in the pilot episode, catching Peter dead drunk at his workstation because apparently showing up sober was too much to ask. Mr. Weed was everything you'd expect from a factory supervisor dealing with Peter Griffin as an employee. Stern, professional, and probably questioning every career choice that led him to that moment. What made Mr. Weed fascinating wasn't just his no-nonsense attitude, but the running joke about his suspiciously theatrical mannerisms. The show never explicitly confirmed anything about his personal life, but his fabulous gestures and dramatic flair became a subtle recurring gag. Despite Peter's constant screw-ups, Mr. Weed kept giving him second chances, firing and rehiring him like it was some kind of workplace hobby. The irony is that this unusual loyalty to Peter ultimately sealed his fate. In the episode where everything went wrong, Peter decided to invite his boss over for dinner to make a good impression. Surprisingly, the evening started perfectly. Mr. Weed was genuinely impressed by Peter's home, family, and even Brian's ability to speak. He was so impressed that he offered Peter a promotion to head of toy development. That's when dinner took a deadly turn. Brian, shocked by this unexpected good news, started choking on a dinner roll. When Peter and Lois performed the Heimlich maneuver, the roll shot out of Brian's mouth like a projectile and landed directly in Mr. Weed's throat. And unlike the countless other times characters have faced mortal peril in this show, Mr. Weed actually died from choking. The funeral scene was classic Family Guy darkness. Mr. Weed left behind a videotaped will announcing that the happy-go-lucky toy factory would be demolished to make way for something called the homoerotic toy factory. It was absurd, tragic, and weirdly fitting for a character whose sexuality had been a running gag throughout his appearances. Moving from workplace fatalities to relationship drama, let's talk about Loretta Brown, Cleveland's ex-wife, who met her end in a way that perfectly summarized her entire character arc. Loretta was everything Cleveland wasn't. Where he was calm and soft-spoken, she was loud, demanding, and took no prisoners when it came to getting what she wanted. Their marriage started cracking when Quagmire's infamous inability to control himself led to an affair. During a fishing trip, a fish accidentally landed on Loretta's chest, and she took it as some kind of cosmic sign to sleep with the guy who caught it. Classic Family Guy logic, really. When Peter and Brian discovered this affair, they recognized Quagmire by his distinctive tattoo, leading to the most awkward revelation scene in television history. Cleveland's reaction to learning about the betrayal was so pathetically calm that it almost hurt to watch. Instead of rage or dramatic confrontation, he just apologized and accepted being kicked out of his own home. It wasn't until Peter and Lois called him out for being too passive that Cleveland finally found his spine and went after Quagmire. After their divorce was finalized, Loretta lived alone in a house on the hill, which sounds poetic until you remember this is Family Guy, and nothing stays peaceful for long. Her death came during one of Peter's elaborate pranks that somehow always managed to destroy Cleveland's property. This time, instead of Cleveland surviving the chaos like usual, Loretta got caught in the destruction and was crushed by falling debris. The reason behind Loretta's permanent exit was actually practical rather than narrative. Her voice actress, Alex Borstein, who also voices Lois, found Loretta's gravelly voice too difficult and painful to perform. Rather than recast the character, the writers decided to kill her off permanently, which honestly feels like the most Family Guy solution possible. Speaking of deaths that came out of nowhere, Horus's demise was particularly heartbreaking for fans of the Drunken Clam. This guy had been serving drinks to Peter, Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland since the early seasons, surviving multiple near-death experiences that should have killed any normal bartender. He'd been shot, knocked unconscious, and even survived a fire, leading viewers to believe he was practically immortal. His luck finally ran out during a softball game between the Drunken Clam and Goldman's Pharmacy. Jerome, brought in as a ringer for Mort's team, was at bat when Horus tried to strike him out. Instead of a strikeout, Horus got struck down permanently. The episode revealed his death so casually that it almost felt cruel. But that's exactly the kind of dark humor Family Guy specializes in. The aftermath was even more devastating. The Drunken Clam was set to close permanently, which would have destroyed one of the show's most important locations. Peter tried everything to save the bar, but it was Jerome himself, the man who accidentally killed Horus, who stepped up to buy the establishment and keep it running. It was a surprisingly touching resolution to a tragic situation. Now let's talk about Peter's father, or at least the man he thought was his father for most of his life. Francis Griffin was the embodiment of strict Irish Catholic values, taken to an uncomfortable extreme. His dislike of Lois simply because she was Protestant created constant family tension, and his general disappointment in Peter was palpable in every scene they shared. When Francis retired and moved in with the Griffin family, he transformed their home into what looked like a Catholic gift shop explosion. Crucifixes appeared in every room. Religious imagery covered the walls, and the atmosphere became so oppressive that Peter actually convinced the Pope to visit and talk some sense into his father. The fact that Francis accused the Pope of going soft tells you everything you need to know about his personality. Francis met his end during Meg's birthday party, which was already going poorly because Peter was, as usual, being a complete embarrassment. While attempting one of his signature stupid stunts, Peter accidentally caused an accident that put Francis in the hospital. On his deathbed, Francis had some final words for his son that were both cruel and oddly accurate. He called Peter a fat, stinking drunk, which honestly wasn't wrong, but the timing made it particularly harsh. The revelation that Francis wasn't even Peter's biological father came during therapy sessions afterward. Peter discovered his real father was an Irishman named Mickey McFinnigan, who only accepted Peter after he proved himself in a drinking contest. It was a twisted validation of everything Francis had criticized about Peter's character. Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin, also received the permanent death treatment, though her passing was handled with less dramatic flair. She died of a stroke at the beginning of an episode that quickly shifted focus to Peter getting involved with an older woman, which was weird timing even by Family Guy standards. Thelma had always been a complex character, technically nicer than Francis, but carrying her own set of serious problems. She was a smoker, gambler, and alcoholic who had created several traumatic childhood memories for Peter through her neglectful and sometimes abusive behavior. Her habit of dropping bombshells on Peter whenever she visited made every appearance feel like an emotional landmine. The most shocking revelation came when Peter needed his birth certificate and discovered he wasn't born in America, but in Mexico. Thelma had gone there to terminate her pregnancy after learning Peter's real father was an Irish drunk, but changed her mind after giving birth and smuggled baby Peter back to the United States. She then married Francis to give Peter a father figure, creating the lie that lasted Peter's entire childhood. Moving into the realm of characters that almost nobody mourned, Doug's death was announced so casually that it felt like an afterthought. This preschool rival of Stewie's had been a thorn in the baby's side for multiple episodes, representing everything Stewie hated about other children his age. Their rivalry started over playground politics and escalated into full-scale warfare, complete with campaign strategies and political maneuvering when Doug ran unopposed for snack captain. Stewie's terror at the thought of Doug gaining any kind of political experience, even at the preschool level, led to some of the show's most absurd storylines involving toddler espionage and election fraud. The episode ended with Stewie wearing the snack captain hat and casually mentioning that Doug had died in a commuter plane crash that morning. The matter-of-fact delivery and complete lack of emotional response from anyone made it clear that Doug's death was meant to be darkly comedic rather than tragic. Fans were actually relieved to see the annoying character permanently removed from the show. Bertram's death was far more dramatic and tied into one of Family Guy's most science fiction-heavy storylines. As Stewie's artificially conceived half-brother, Bertram represented a legitimate threat to Stewie's intellectual supremacy and served as his most formidable opponent throughout multiple episodes. Their first encounter inside Peter's reproductive system established them as equals in terms of intelligence and ruthlessness. After forming a temporary alliance based on their mutual hatred of Lois, the two babies eventually turned on each other in a conflict that escalated beyond playground politics into actual warfare involving time travel and assassination attempts. Bertram's master plan involved traveling back in time to eliminate one of Stewie's ancestors, Leonardo da Vinci, thereby erasing Stewie from existence entirely. The fact that he actually succeeded in killing Da Vinci showed just how dangerous and competent Bertram could be when properly motivated. However, Stewie proved to be the superior strategist by tracking Bertram down through time and ending their rivalry permanently. The execution scene, where Stewie asks Bertram about his favorite bottled water before killing him, demonstrated the cold calculation that made Stewie such a compelling character. Unlike Doug's casual disposal, Bertram's death felt earned through multiple episodes of build-up and character development. The double murder episode stands out as one of Family Guy's most ambitious attempts at sustained storytelling across a full episode length. The mystery dinner party format allowed the writers to eliminate multiple characters while providing entertainment value through the whodunit structure. Muriel Goldman's death during this episode felt particularly cruel because she had never been anything more than a background character who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Mort's wife, she was essentially a female version of his neurotic personality, which made their relationship believable but didn't give her much individual characterization. The revelation that she had been exchanging mysterious messages with James Woods created false suspense about her potential involvement in the murders, but she was ultimately just another victim caught up in someone else's revenge scheme. Her funeral scene showed how little impact she had made on the community, with even her husband and son seeming relatively unaffected by her death. Diane Simmons represented the episode's true villain and most shocking revelation. As Tom Tucker's longtime co-anchor, she had been a background presence for years without showing any signs of homicidal tendencies. Her transformation from professional newswoman to calculating murderer demonstrated how deeply personal rejections and professional disappointments could push someone over the edge. The motive behind her killing spree was painfully relatable in its pettiness. Being dumped by James Woods for a younger woman and facing replacement by a younger co-anchor as she turned 40 created the perfect storm of humiliation and desperation. Her methodical approach to framing Tom Tucker for the murders showed intelligence and planning that made her genuinely dangerous. Diane's final confrontation with Lois provided the classic villain monologue moment where all her motivations were revealed. The irony of being killed by Stewie, a baby, after successfully eliminating multiple adult targets added the kind of dark humor that Family Guy specialized in creating. Patty Tanager's death was perhaps the most satisfying for viewers who had endured his annoying catchphrase and constant attempts to start fights over nothing. This short, aggressive man represented everything irritating about people who create drama where none needs to exist. His role as the boss of a car dealership where Brian worked temporarily showed that his obnoxious personality wasn't limited to casual encounters. Even in professional settings, he couldn't resist making inappropriate comments and stirring up unnecessary conflict with his employees and customers. The poetic justice of his death came when he tried to start a fight with someone operating a military tank. His final words, maintaining his catchphrase even while facing certain doom, showed that he was committed to his obnoxious personality right until the end. The audience's reaction to his death was overwhelmingly positive, proving that sometimes characters are specifically designed to be eliminated. The deaths of Angela and Mayor Adam West carried more emotional weight because they were tied to the real-life passing of their voice actors. These weren't creative decisions made for storyline purposes, but necessary responses to losing the talented people who brought these characters to life. Angela's character arc, from hostile supervisor to lonely woman seeking connection, provided some of Peter's most uncomfortable workplace storylines. Her sexual harassment of Peter while threatening his job security created situations that were both comedically awkward and genuinely problematic by today's standards. Her backstory, revealing years of loneliness and isolation, made her desperate actions more understandable without excusing them. The resolution where Peter dresses up to take her on a fake date showed his capacity for kindness even when dealing with someone who had made his life difficult. Carrie Fisher's death in real life meant that Angela's character had to be written out permanently. The funeral scene in her honor served as both a farewell to the character and a tribute to the actress who had voiced her. Peter's mistake of ending up at the wrong funeral added typical Family Guy humor to what was otherwise a genuinely touching moment. Mayor Adam West's death marked the end of one of the show's most beloved recurring characters. His wonderfully insane personality and possibly corrupt political practices had provided countless moments of absurd humor throughout his long tenure as Quahog's mayor. The real Adam West's connection to his animated counterpart made the character feel more authentic and grounded despite his completely unrealistic behavior and dialogue. His brief challenge from Lois during her political phase showed that even incompetent leadership was preferable to the corruption that inevitably followed. His marriage to Carol Pewterschmidt, Lois's sister, created additional family connections that made his death more personally impactful for the main characters. The tribute episode where Brian petitioned to rename the high school after Mayor West provided proper closure for a character who had been part of the show's fabric for over 16 seasons. The ghost appearance at the end where Mayor West saves Brian from falling off a cliff gave the character one final moment of heroism and showed that death couldn't completely remove him from the Family Guy universe. His replacement by Wild West as mayor acknowledged that the character was irreplaceable while allowing the show to continue. These permanent deaths in Family Guy serve multiple purposes beyond simple shock value. They demonstrate that actions can have genuine consequences, even in a cartoon universe known for its resurrection-running gags. Some characters were eliminated because they had served their narrative purpose, others because fan reaction made their continued presence counterproductive, and some because real-world circumstances forced the writer's hands. The variety in how these deaths were handled shows the range of Family Guy's storytelling capabilities, from casual mentions that treat death as an afterthought to elaborate murder mystery episodes that build tension across an entire episode. The show has found multiple ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature dark humor. The emotional impact of these deaths varies significantly based on character development and audience attachment. Long-running characters like Mayor West and Horus created genuine sadness among fans, while annoying characters like Doug and Patty Tanager were celebrated in their passing. This range of reactions demonstrates how effectively the show had developed distinct personalities for even its minor recurring characters. What makes these permanent deaths particularly interesting is how they contrast with Family Guy's usual approach to cartoon violence. The show regularly features deaths that are immediately reversed or ignored, making the permanent ones stand out as genuinely significant events. When a character stays dead in this universe, it carries extra weight, because viewers know it's not the norm. The practical reasons behind some of these deaths, such as voice actor availability or fan reaction, show how external factors can influence creative decisions in long-running animated series. The writers have generally handled these necessary eliminations with appropriate respect while maintaining the show's comedic tone. Looking back at this collection of permanently deceased characters reveals the evolution of Family Guy's storytelling over its many seasons. Earlier deaths, like Mr. Weed were often accidental consequences of the show's chaotic humor, while later deaths, like those in the murder mystery episode, showed more deliberate narrative planning. The show's willingness to permanently eliminate characters demonstrates confidence in its ability to create new sources of humor and conflict without relying on the same recurring personalities indefinitely. This creative flexibility has helped Family Guy maintain freshness across its extended run, while still honoring the contributions of departed characters. These deaths also serve as reminders that even in the most outrageous fictional universes, some actions cannot be undone. They provide moments of genuine consequence in a show that otherwise operates on cartoon logic, where nothing permanent ever happens to the main characters. So there you have it, fellow insomniacs and Family Guy enthusiasts. A complete tour through the surprisingly extensive graveyard of characters who didn't make it back from their final Family Guy appearances. From workplace accidents to murder mysteries, from natural causes to tank-related incidents, the show has found creative ways to permanently remove characters while maintaining its signature blend of dark humor and unexpected heart. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, even cartoon death can sometimes be permanent. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with the writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for the Cleveland show. During season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, they rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog, who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics, requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique. To create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary, MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for commentemporation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams, and maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows.
Picture this. You're lying in bed, phone in hand, ready to drift off to the soothing sound of random Family Guy trivia. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because tonight we're diving deep into the most bizarre, shocking, and downright disturbing moments that have happened to every single character in Quahog. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your favorite dysfunctional cartoon family the same way again. Now, before we start this journey through animated trauma, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the worst day of your life was broadcast on national television for millions to laugh at? Well, that's basically every episode of Family Guy for these poor fictional souls. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the darkest corners of Seth MacFarlane's twisted imagination. Starting alphabetically with Adam West, because why not begin with a mayor who's nuttier than a fruitcake? This eccentric political figure finally found his soulmate when he married Carol, Lois's sister. For a guy who regularly talks to his own hand and thinks cardboard cutouts are real people, finding true love seemed like a miracle. The wedding was beautiful, the honeymoon was passionate, and for once in his bizarre life, Adam West looked genuinely happy. But happiness in Family Guy is like a snowball in hell. It melts faster than you can say cutaway gag. Carol decided that one mayor wasn't enough for her appetite, so she started having an affair with another man. When Adam discovered this betrayal, instead of walking away with his dignity intact, he challenged the other guy to a duel. Because nothing says rational response like pistols at dawn, right? The worst part wasn't just the cheating. It was watching this lonely, eccentric man desperately fight for someone who clearly didn't deserve his devotion. Carol promised it would never happen again, but we all knew that was complete garbage. Adam deserved so much better than a woman who treated his heart like a revolving door. Moving on to Angela, Peter's former boss at the toy company. Unlike most characters who simply disappear without explanation, Angela got a proper send-off that hit viewers right in the feels. When voice actress Carrie Fisher passed away in real life, the show made the touching decision to address it directly in the series. According to Peter's explanation, Angela died doing what she loved, which was apparently swimming less than 20 minutes after eating. Now, we all know that's an old wives' tale about getting cramps, but in the Family Guy universe, it was enough to send this strong, independent businesswoman to her watery grave. It's both absurd and oddly respectful, which perfectly captures the show's ability to blend humor with genuine emotion. Barbara Pewterschmidt, or Babs as she's known to friends, has endured decades of her husband Carter's wandering eye. This woman has put up with more infidelity than a reality TV show contestant, and somehow she keeps forgiving him. The breaking point came when Peter caught Carter in bed with yet another woman, and after some classic Griffin family blackmail shenanigans, the secret inevitably came out. Picture the devastation on Babs's face when she realized that everyone knew about her husband's latest affair before she did. The humiliation of being the last to know, the embarrassment of having your private pain become public gossip. It's enough to break anyone's spirit. She kicked his crusty behind out of the house and tried to start fresh, but love makes fools of us all, and she eventually took him back. The irony is that Babs isn't exactly innocent herself. She's had her own affairs over the years, including that memorable encounter with Jackie Gleason, but there's something particularly cruel about Carter's public humiliation of his wife that makes this betrayal sting more than the others. Bonnie Swanson represents the dark side of suburban marriage. When she's not cheating on her paralyzed husband, she's literally trying to murder him with ground glass in his food, or buying rickety houses hoping they'll collapse on him. But karma has a way of coming full circle, and Bonnie got a taste of her own medicine in the most humiliating way possible. During their daughter's birthday party, with friends and family gathered around, Bonnie overheard Joe having an affair with a colleague through the baby monitor. Imagine the mortification of discovering your spouse's betrayal while surrounded by people who are supposed to be celebrating your family. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the method of discovery was like something out of a soap opera nightmare. The fact that this happened during what should have been a joyous occasion for their child makes it even more devastating. Bonnie may be a serial cheater herself, but nobody deserves to have their private pain exposed in such a public and humiliating way. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the philosophical dog with more emotional baggage than a therapy convention. Poor Brian has endured countless injuries over the years, from losing his teeth in a fight with Peter to getting his face smashed by a fire hydrant. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was his temporary death in season 12. Getting hit by that car and actually dying, even if it was only for 2 episodes, represents the ultimate trauma for any character. Death is supposed to be permanent, final, the end of all stories. For Brian to experience that ultimate fear and then somehow return to life, the psychological impact must have been enormous. Think about it from his perspective. One moment he's crossing the street, the next he's presumably facing whatever comes after life. Then suddenly he's back, but with the knowledge that death is real, permanent, and can happen at any moment. That kind of existential trauma would mess with anyone's head, even a talking dog who writes pretentious novels. Bruce's story is one of love, acceptance, and heartbreaking loss. After years of hiding his true self, he finally came out, married his longtime partner Jeffrey, and even had a baby through surrogacy. For the first time in his life, Bruce was living authentically, openly, and happily. He had everything he'd ever wanted: a husband, a child, and the freedom to be himself without shame or fear. But Family Guy has never been kind to happiness, and during what should have been a perfect vacation in Bermuda, tragedy struck in the most brutal way imaginable. Jeffrey's hat fell into the water, and being the loving husband he was, he jumped in to retrieve it. That simple act of devotion cost him his life when a shark attacked and killed him in front of Bruce's horrified eyes. The imagery of watching Jeffrey get torn apart by a predator, followed by the soul-crushing sight of 2 coffins being loaded onto the plane, represents a level of trauma that goes beyond physical pain. Bruce had to watch his dreams of a perfect life literally get devoured before his eyes. Carter Pewterschmidt is arguably one of the most evil characters on the show. This billionaire has hidden cancer cures for profit, destroyed countless lives for money, and shown no remorse for any of his actions. But karma caught up with him in the most ironic way possible when Lois accidentally shot him in the head. The bullet caused severe brain damage that completely changed Carter's personality. Suddenly, this cruel capitalist became kind, generous, and caring. He wanted to give away all his money to charity and live a life of compassion instead of greed. For the first time ever, Carter was actually happy and at peace with himself. But Barbara couldn't stand the thought of losing their fortune, so she shot him in the head again, reversing the brain damage and bringing back the cruel version of her husband. The tragedy isn't just that Carter got shot twice by his own family. It's that he briefly experienced what it felt like to be a good person, only to have that stolen away from him. Chris Griffin's worst moment doesn't involve getting turned into sausage or any of the other bizarre things that happen to him regularly. No. His darkest hour came when the Griffin house caught fire and Herbert the creepy neighbor rushed in to supposedly save him. For a brief moment, it looked like Herbert might actually be a hero, but instead of carrying Chris to safety, he took him straight back to his own house. The most disturbing part wasn't even Herbert's actions. It was his family's complete lack of concern. When they discovered what happened, their reaction was basically that Herbert had earned the right to kidnap Chris. The casual acceptance of what was clearly an inappropriate situation shows just how little Chris's family actually cares about his well-being. Cleveland Brown has endured countless humiliations over the years, from his bathtub crashing through his house repeatedly to various other physical mishaps. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was being betrayed by one of his closest friends in the most heinous way imaginable. Joe Swanson tricked Cleveland into going to what he thought was a vacation in Florida, but was actually a retirement home run by seniors who harvest organs from unsuspecting victims. Joe wanted Peter's legs for himself, but when that plan fell through, he sent Cleveland as a substitute without warning him about the danger. Imagine discovering that someone you trusted with your life had essentially sold you out to organ harvesters. Cleveland literally lost his legs because Joe was too selfish to give up his twisted scheme. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound because it came from someone he considered family. The mystery of Cleveland Jr. represents one of the show's darkest unsolved cases. The original Cleveland Jr. was energetic, slim, and full of life. But suddenly, without explanation, he was replaced by a completely different person who was overweight, slow, and bore no resemblance to the original character. The official explanation is that the original was replaced by a secret agent, but what actually happened to the real Cleveland Jr. remains unknown. The implications are terrifying. Is he dead? Is he being held captive somewhere? Has he been brainwashed? The uncertainty is almost worse than knowing the truth would be. This represents every parent's worst nightmare, having their child disappear and replaced by an imposter while everyone else pretends nothing happened. Cleveland doesn't even seem to notice or care that his son is completely different, which adds another layer of tragedy to the situation. Consuela works harder than anyone else in Quahog, fighting for her fellow maids while cleaning houses for multiple families and even Superman. But her dedication to helping others led her to work for James Woods, a decision she would come to regret in the most horrific way possible. In one of the show's darkest moments, Consuela revealed that Woods had assaulted her nephew, who later took his own life as a result of the trauma. This single line of dialogue carries more weight than entire episodes of physical comedy. It's a reminder that behind the jokes and gags, these characters have real pain and real trauma. The fact that Consuela continued working and fighting for others despite carrying this enormous burden speaks to her incredible strength. But nobody should have to endure such a devastating loss, especially when it could have been prevented. Death himself, the actual Grim Reaper, experienced his own form of mortality when he twisted his ankle while chasing Peter. Suddenly, the being responsible for all death on Earth was sidelined by a simple injury. Without Death able to do his job, chaos erupted as accidents piled up with no consequences. Being forced to hand over his powers to Peter Griffin, of all people, must have been absolutely humiliating for such a powerful entity. Imagine being rendered helpless by something as mundane as a twisted ankle when you're supposed to be one of the most feared forces in the universe. The irony of Death being unable to die from his own injury while watching Peter bungle the most important job in existence must have been torture. Sometimes the worst pain isn't physical. It's watching someone else destroy everything you've worked for. Diane Simmons' downfall began when she discovered she was being replaced by a younger news anchor. After dedicating her life to journalism, the industry she loved was throwing her away like yesterday's newspaper. The rejection and humiliation drove her to madness, leading to a killing spree at James Woods' mansion party. Her plan to frame Tom Tucker and reclaim her career was as desperate as it was violent. But when it all fell apart and she was about to kill Lois, Stewie ended her reign of terror with a single shot. Going from respected journalist to murderous villain to corpse in a matter of hours represents a complete life collapse that few characters have experienced. Dr. Hartman's medical incompetence is legendary, but the one time he actually did his job correctly, it ruined his career. During a routine prostate exam on Peter, he performed the procedure exactly as he was supposed to, but Peter's ignorance and embarrassment led to false assault charges that cost Hartman his medical license. The injustice of losing his livelihood for doing his job properly must have been devastating for someone who, despite his flaws, genuinely wants to help people. Being dragged through court and having his reputation destroyed over a misunderstanding shows how quickly a life can be ruined by ignorance and fear. When Peter later needed the same procedure and had to crawl back to the doctor he destroyed, the humiliation was complete. Hartman eventually got his license back, but the damage to his reputation and the trauma of the legal battle left permanent scars. Ernie the giant chicken has survived countless brutal fights with Peter over the years, but his battle with Meg might have been his last. When Meg moved in with her boyfriend's family and Ernie insulted Peter, she stood up for her father in the most violent way possible. Despite all the abuse Peter has heaped on her over the years, Meg's loyalty to her family ran deep enough that she couldn't stand hearing someone else trash-talk him. Her brutal decapitation of Ernie was both shocking and oddly touching, showing that family bonds can survive even the worst treatment. The sight of Ernie's headless body running around in front of his horrified family was disturbing, even by Family Guy standards. The fact that we didn't get the usual close-up of his eyes suggests this might have been his final defeat, making Meg the one person who could do what Peter never could. The evil monkey's story is actually quite sad when you think about it. For years, he terrorized Chris by angrily pointing at him from the closet, but it turns out he was just too shy to start a conversation. All that time, he wasn't evil at all, just socially awkward and misunderstood. But before this revelation, the poor monkey was beaten up by Brian's son Dylan. Being attacked by someone when you're already struggling with social anxiety and communication issues must have been incredibly traumatic. The monkey was already isolated and afraid, and the violence only made things worse. Glenn Quagmire's entire identity revolves around his sexual prowess and his most prized anatomical feature. So when a shark bit off his manhood during a skiing trip, it represented the ultimate nightmare for someone whose whole personality is built around sexual conquest. Watching Quagmire become a shell of himself, miserable and lost without the one thing that defined him, was both comedic and genuinely sad. His entire sense of self-worth was tied to something that could be taken away in an instant, showing how fragile our identities really are. The solution, getting Ida's old equipment with a huge mole on it, was both generous and awkward. Having to explain to potential partners that you're using your father's former anatomy would be enough to give anyone performance anxiety for life. The greased-up deaf guy remained a mystery for years, slipping away from every attempt to catch him while spouting his signature catchphrase. But his origin story revealed a tragic accident that changed him from an ordinary businessman into the greasy enigma we know today. Getting caught in a grease truck explosion severe enough to cause deafness and require constant lubrication to survive sounds absolutely horrifying. Imagine going from a normal life to being a permanently slippery outcast who can't hear and can barely communicate with others. The transformation from respected professional to neighborhood oddity represents a complete loss of identity and social connection. He went from being someone people respected to someone they actively tried to avoid or capture. Herbert's backstory adds a dark historical element to his character. As a World War II pilot who was shot down and sent to a concentration camp, he experienced some of humanity's darkest hours. Being forced to do degrading work like sorting recyclables while imprisoned shows how war can strip away dignity and humanity. The fact that he describes the sticky trash as the worst part, while clearly downplaying much more serious trauma, suggests a coping mechanism of focusing on minor irritations to avoid confronting deeper pain. His current inappropriate behavior toward Chris might stem from the psychological damage of his wartime experiences. Ida's journey represents the struggle of living authentically while facing rejection from those you love most. When she came out as transgender to her son Quagmire, instead of receiving support, she was shunned and rejected. Being abandoned by your own child for being true to yourself is one of the cruelest forms of emotional pain. Even after Quagmire eventually accepted her, he later forced her to choose between him and her relationship with Brian. Making someone pick between their child and their chance at happiness is pure selfishness, especially after she had already made the generous gesture of giving him her former anatomy. Joe Swanson's transformation from paraplegic to quadriplegic during a bull run represents every disabled person's worst fear, losing even more independence and control over their life. Being paralyzed from the neck down instead of just the waist changed everything for him. The abandonment that followed was even worse than the physical trauma. His wife Bonnie immediately left him for Europe, claiming she didn't sign up for this level of care. His friends tried to help, but eventually dumped him in a terrible state facility when it became too much work. Being betrayed by both your spouse and your closest friends when you need them most is a special kind of hell. Joe eventually regained some function, but the emotional scars of abandonment would last forever. Jerome carries the heaviest emotional burden of any character on the show. Losing his wife to cancer just 1 week after their wedding, followed by his daughter's death from pneumonia 6 weeks later, represents a level of tragedy that transcends comedy. Even in a cartoon universe where death and destruction happen regularly, Jerome's story stands out as genuinely heartbreaking. The timing of these losses, coming right after what should have been the happiest moments of his life, makes the tragedy even more poignant. Jillian's happiness was shattered when Diane Simmons murdered her husband Derek during her killing spree. After being jerked around by Brian and finally finding a good man to marry, having that torn away by random violence must have been devastating. The look of absolute devastation on her face when she realized her husband was dead spoke volumes about the depth of her loss. Going from newlywed bliss to widow in a matter of moments represents the kind of trauma that changes someone forever. The Kool-Aid Man, despite being a corporate mascot, became a victim of Stewie's evil twin in one of the show's more surreal moments. Having your glass body smashed and your contents consumed by a psychotic baby represents a uniquely cartoonish form of murder. The fact that he returned later suggests some form of immortality, but the experience of being destroyed and consumed must have been traumatic even for a sentient beverage container. Lois Griffin has endured tremendous physical and emotional trauma over the years. While getting killed by Stewie in a simulation doesn't count as real, her other experiences are genuinely horrific. Getting boiling oil thrown on her by Peter left her with severe burns covering her entire body, but arguably worse was the mental trauma of watching Peter perform oral acts on her sick mother due to a hypnotherapy mishap. Physical burns heal, but that mental image would haunt her forever. The violation of boundaries and the grotesque nature of the incident make it worse than any physical injury. Loretta Brown's death was both tragic and disturbing. Falling to her death when Peter destroyed her house was bad enough, but Quagmire's necrophilic intentions afterward added another layer of horror to her fate. Being killed by your ex-husband's friend's stupidity and then having your corpse violated represents a complete denial of dignity, even in death. The fact that this was played for laughs makes it even more disturbing. Meg Griffin has endured so much abuse that choosing just one worst moment seems impossible. She's been shot, stabbed, humiliated, and ignored by her family for years. But losing her arms and legs while becoming deaf, dumb, and blind represents the ultimate disability nightmare. Being completely helpless and unable to communicate or care for yourself while still being conscious and aware would be torture beyond imagination. The combination of physical disability and sensory deprivation creates a prison worse than any jail cell. Mort Goldman's loss of his wife Muriel was made even more tragic by his inability to think of anything positive to say about their marriage. After decades together, being unable to recall a single happy memory suggests a relationship built on obligation rather than love. The fact that she died violently during Diane's killing spree adds sudden trauma to what might have otherwise been a natural parting. Having your spouse murdered while you're realizing your marriage was empty creates a complex grief that would be hard to process. Neil Goldman's humiliation when Meg kissed him during a crisis was compounded by his own poor judgment in broadcasting the moment publicly. Instead of treasuring a private moment, he turned it into a public spectacle that embarrassed them both. His subsequent suicide attempt showed how deeply the rejection affected him, but his actions had already ruined any chance he might have had with Meg. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are consequences of our own poor choices. Peter Griffin has caused enormous destruction throughout the series, but he's also been on the receiving end of significant trauma. Learning that his father figure wasn't his biological father created an identity crisis that shook his understanding of who he was. The existential pain of questioning your entire life story and family history cuts deeper than any physical injury. Peter's struggle to understand his place in the world after this revelation showed a vulnerability that's rare for his character. Seamus represents the ultimate survivor, having lost most of his body parts to various predators over the years. Whether it was James Woods, sharks, or other creatures, the systematic loss of limbs and organs while somehow remaining alive and conscious is a nightmare beyond comprehension. The fact that his origin story keeps changing suggests that the trauma was so severe, he can't even remember it clearly. Living as mostly wood and prosthetics while maintaining consciousness would be a constant reminder of everything he's lost. Stewie Griffin has endured incredible trauma for a 1-year-old baby. From dingo attacks to being fused with his teddy bear, his young life has been filled with horror. But the worst incident was when he split his head open falling downstairs and his family refused to get him medical attention. Instead of rushing him to the hospital, they tried to cover up the injury and hide the evidence. Watching a raccoon gnaw on his exposed brain, while his family worried more about getting in trouble than his health, shows a level of neglect that borders on criminal. The fact that he spent months in a coma while they continued to prioritize their own convenience over his life demonstrates how little they truly care about him despite their occasional shows of affection. Tom Tucker's identity crisis, when he faced replacement by a younger anchor, led to a complete career meltdown. Following Peter's advice to get tattoos live on air was the final nail in his professional coffin, destroying everything he'd worked for his entire life. Being fired from the job that defined him and then nearly committing suicide over the loss shows how completely his sense of self was tied to his career. The humiliation of having his replacement want to interview him before his suicide attempt added insult to injury. Trisha Takanawa's fate during the Y2K Apocalypse episode, becoming a victim of cannibalism, represents the ultimate objectification. Being reduced to literal food for other people strips away every aspect of humanity and dignity. Even in a post-apocalyptic setting, the casual way her consumption was discussed shows how completely society had broken down and how little value was placed on individual human life. Each of these characters has faced their own unique form of suffering, from physical trauma to emotional devastation to existential crisis. What makes these moments particularly impactful is how they contrast with the show's usual comedic tone. When Family Guy decides to get dark, it doesn't hold back. These aren't just random gags or throwaway jokes. They're genuine character moments that reveal the psychological depth hiding beneath the surface humor. The fact that these characters continue to function and interact normally after experiencing such trauma speaks to both human resilience and the show's commitment to treating serious subjects with the same casual attitude as everything else. Understanding these worst moments helps us appreciate the full scope of what these characters have endured. It's easy to laugh at their misfortunes when they're presented as comedy, but examining them seriously reveals a tapestry of human suffering that would challenge anyone's sanity. The genius of Family Guy lies in its ability to make us laugh at things that would horrify us in real life. By presenting extreme trauma in a comedic context, the show allows us to process difficult emotions and experiences in a safe environment. These characters serve as vessels for our own fears and anxieties, experiencing the worst possible outcomes so we don't have to. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering provides a strange form of comfort and inspiration. Whether it's betrayal by loved ones, physical mutilation, loss of identity, or complete abandonment, every character has faced their ultimate nightmare and somehow survived to appear in the next episode. The cyclical nature of their suffering, where trauma is quickly forgotten and life returns to normal, reflects how we often deal with our own pain by compartmentalizing and moving forward rather than dwelling on past hurts. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can take comfort in knowing that no matter how bad your day was, at least you're not a Family Guy character. At least you don't have to worry about your house being destroyed by a giant chicken, your spouse cheating with your neighbor, or your family refusing to take you to the hospital when your brain is exposed. Sweet dreams, and remember that in the morning, you'll wake up in a world that's probably a little less chaotic than Quahog, Rhode Island. Though given the state of things these days, that might not be as comforting as it used to be. But hey, that's a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, just let the absurd suffering of animated characters lull you into peaceful slumber, secure in the knowledge that your problems are probably more manageable than theirs. Sleep tight, and don't let the evil monkeys point at you from the closet. Picture this. You're watching Family Guy, laughing at Peter's latest ridiculous scheme, when suddenly you realize there's an entire universe of hidden stories, dark secrets, and mind-bending connections that you've been missing this whole time. Today, we're diving deep into the most shocking Family Guy lore that will completely change how you see the Griffin family forever. What if I told you that Brian Griffin has died multiple times throughout the series, and the Brian we know today might not even be the original? Or that Stewie's sexuality has been planned from the very beginning in ways that most fans never picked up on? We're about to uncover secrets that even die-hard Family Guy fans have overlooked. And trust me, Some of these revelations will blow your mind. Let's start with something that sounds impossible but is actually confirmed canon. The Griffin family exists in a multiverse where infinite versions of themselves are living completely different lives. This isn't just a throwaway gag for a few episodes. Seth MacFarlane and the writers have created an intricate web of parallel universes that explains some of the show's biggest mysteries and most confusing timeline issues. Remember that episode where Stewie and Brian travel to different universes? That wasn't just a one-off adventure. Those alternate realities are constantly affecting the main timeline in ways the show rarely explicitly explains. In one universe, the Griffins are all dogs. In another, everyone's gender is swapped. But here's the kicker. Characters from these alternate dimensions have actually crossed over into the main timeline without anyone noticing. The most disturbing example involves Brian's death and resurrection. When Brian was killed by that car, the Brian that Stewie brought back wasn't technically the same Brian. The time travel created a paradox that split Brian's consciousness across multiple timelines. This explains why Brian's personality has shifted so dramatically over the years. He's literally not the same character anymore, and the show has been subtly hinting at this through his changing behavior patterns and contradictory character development. But Brian's multiversal confusion is nothing compared to what's really going on with Stewie Griffin. Most fans know that Stewie started as a one-dimensional evil baby stereotype, but the evolution of his character reveals something much more complex than simple character development. Stewie's intelligence isn't just advanced for a baby. It's literally supernatural, and there's evidence throughout the series that suggests he's not entirely human. Seth MacFarlane has dropped hints in interviews that Stewie's advanced intelligence comes from genetic experiments conducted by his real father. And no, we're not talking about Peter. The show has never definitively confirmed Peter as Stewie's biological father, despite what most fans assume. There are multiple episodes where Stewie's parentage is questioned, and when you piece together all the clues, a shocking picture emerges. Consider this. Stewie has built time machines, death rays, and teleportation devices using materials he somehow acquires as an infant. He speaks with a sophisticated British accent, despite being born in Rhode Island to parents with American accents. He demonstrates knowledge of complex scientific principles that would challenge PhD researchers. This isn't just cartoon logic. It's the result of genetic manipulation by a character we've met but never suspected. Francis Griffin, Peter's father, isn't just a religious fanatic. He's been secretly involved in genetic research for decades, using his religious connections as a front for experimental work on human enhancement. Stewie's intelligence, his early violent tendencies, and even his eventual character growth are all part of a long-term experiment in human development. Francis has been observing Stewie's progress throughout the series, appearing in episodes specifically to monitor his development. This explains why Stewie's character has evolved from purely evil to complex and multifaceted. It's not character development. It's the natural progression of Francis's experiment reaching different phases. Stewie's growing emotional intelligence and his complicated relationship with his sexuality aren't random character choices. They're predictable outcomes of genetic modifications designed to create a superior human being. Speaking of Stewie's sexuality, the show's handling of this aspect reveals another layer of hidden lore that most viewers miss completely. Seth MacFarlane planned Stewie's sexual orientation from the very beginning, but not in the way most people think. Stewie's attraction to various characters throughout the series follows a specific pattern that reveals something disturbing about his psychological development. Every character Stewie has shown romantic or sexual interest in shares specific traits that connect back to his genetic programming. His crushes aren't random attractions. They're responses to psychological triggers implanted during his genetic modification. This is why his attractions seem inconsistent to casual viewers, but follow a clear pattern when analyzed closely. The most shocking revelation about Stewie's sexuality is that it's not actually about gender preference at all. It's about his subconscious recognition of genetic compatibility. Francis programmed Stewie to be attracted to individuals who would produce genetically superior offspring, regardless of gender. This explains why Stewie's attractions seem to shift and change, because they're not based on personal preference, but on biological programming he doesn't understand. But Stewie isn't the only Griffin family member hiding genetic secrets. Meg Griffin's constant suffering and social rejection aren't just running gags. They're the result of her being a failed experiment from the same program that created Stewie. Meg represents what happens when Francis's genetic modifications go wrong, creating someone intelligent enough to understand their social failure, but not intelligent enough to overcome it. This is why Meg occasionally displays flashes of brilliance or unexpected competence that disappear as quickly as they appear. She's fighting against genetic programming designed to suppress her abilities. Every time Meg almost achieves success or happiness, her modified genetics kick in to sabotage her progress. It's not bad luck or poor writing, it's built-in failure programming. The evidence for this theory is scattered throughout hundreds of episodes, but it becomes undeniable when you realize that Meg's failures always occur at crucial moments that would otherwise lead to her escape from the family's dysfunction. She's not meant to escape because her failure is essential to Francis's long-term experimental goals. Peter Griffin's role in this genetic conspiracy is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. Peter isn't the lovable idiot he appears to be. His stupidity is a carefully constructed facade designed to hide his role as an unwitting test subject and specimen collector for Francis's experiments. Peter's incredible survival rate, despite constant dangerous situations, isn't cartoon logic. It's enhanced genetic durability. Think about it. Peter has survived explosions, falls, poisonings, and countless other incidents that should have killed him multiple times over. His body's ability to recover from extreme trauma isn't natural. It's the result of genetic modifications that Francis administered without Peter's knowledge. Peter's stupidity serves as the perfect cover for these experiments, because no one suspects an idiot of being involved in complex genetic research. Peter's job history reveals the true scope of this conspiracy. Every workplace Peter has been associated with has connections to genetic research, pharmaceutical development, or human experimentation. The brewery, the toy factory, his various short-term employment, they're all fronts for research facilities where Peter unknowingly participates in ongoing experiments. Lois Griffin's background contains the most shocking revelations of all. Her wealthy family isn't just rich. They're one of the founding families of a secret organization dedicated to human genetic advancement. The Pewter-Schmidt fortune comes from decades of illegal human experimentation, and Lois's marriage to Peter wasn't a love story. It was an arranged pairing designed to produce genetically diverse test subjects. Lois knows about the experiments. She's always known. Her seemingly irrational decisions to stay with Peter despite his behavior make perfect sense when you realize she's not a victim of his stupidity. She's his handler. Every major life decision the Griffin family makes serves the research goals of Francis's genetic program. This explains why Lois alternates between loving mother and neglectful parent. Her maternal instincts conflict with her research obligations, creating the inconsistent parenting that defines her character. When she's nurturing and protective, she's responding to genuine maternal feelings. When she's dismissive or cruel, she's following research protocols that require emotional distance from test subjects. The most chilling aspect of Lois's involvement is that she genuinely loves her children while simultaneously facilitating their use as experimental subjects. She's trapped between her role as a mother and her obligations to the genetic research program that controls her family's life. Chris Griffin appears to be the only family member not directly involved in the genetic experiments, but his role is actually the most important of all. Chris represents the control group in Francis's multi-generational study. His normal intelligence, typical teenage behavior, and relatively stable personality provide the baseline against which Stewie's enhancements and Meg's failures are measured. But Chris isn't as normal as he appears. His artistic abilities and occasional flashes of insight suggest that he's inherited some of the genetic modifications without the extreme effects seen in his siblings. Chris might be the successful outcome Francis has been working toward, a genetically enhanced human who appears completely normal while possessing subtle advantages. The show has been building toward a revelation about Chris's true nature for years. His relationship with his family members, his inexplicable survival of dangerous situations, and his ability to succeed despite apparent limitations all point to him being the ultimate product of Francis's genetic program. Cleveland Brown's departure from Family Guy wasn't just about launching a spin-off show. Cleveland discovered the truth about the Griffin family's genetic experiments and had to be removed from Quahog before he could expose the conspiracy. His return to the show coincided with his acceptance of a role in maintaining the cover-up. Cleveland's friendship with Peter serves a specific purpose in Francis's research program. As Peter's closest friend, Cleveland provides emotional stability that prevents Peter from asking too many questions about his family's unusual circumstances. Cleveland's laid-back personality and reluctance to confront difficult truths make him the perfect, unwitting accomplice. The most disturbing aspect of Cleveland's involvement is that he's begun to suspect the truth, but chooses to remain silent because he fears the consequences of exposure. Several episodes hint at Cleveland's growing awareness that something isn't right with the Griffin family, but he consistently chooses ignorance over investigation. Joe Swanson's paralysis isn't the result of a police accident as commonly believed. Joe discovered evidence of the genetic experiments during a routine investigation and was deliberately paralyzed to prevent him from pursuing the case further. His continued presence in the neighborhood serves as a warning to other potential investigators about the consequences of getting too close to the truth. Joe's incredible upper body strength and his ability to function as an effective police officer despite his disability aren't just inspirational character traits. They're evidence of genetic enhancement designed to compensate for his paralysis. Francis provided Joe with genetic modifications that enhance his remaining abilities in exchange for his silence about the experiments. The relationship between Joe and his family reflects his conflicted feelings about his situation. He genuinely loves his wife and son, but he knows that his involvement in covering up the Griffin family conspiracy puts them at risk. This explains the tension and occasional hostility in Joe's family interactions. Quagmire's over-sexualized personality and his antagonistic relationship with Brian serve specific purposes in maintaining the genetic conspiracy. Quagmire's promiscuity provides Francis with a steady stream of genetic material from diverse sources, expanding the database available for future experiments. His hatred of Brian stems from his subconscious recognition that Brian represents a threat to the stability of the experimental environment. Quagmire's pilot career allows him to transport research materials and subjects without detection. His frequent travel provides the perfect cover for moving genetic samples, experimental equipment, and even human subjects between research facilities. The show has never fully explained how Quagmire maintains his lifestyle on a pilot's salary, but his involvement in the genetic research program provides the missing financial motivation. The most shocking aspect of Quagmire's role is that his sexual behavior isn't driven by personal desire, but by genetic programming designed to maximize reproductive output for research purposes. Quagmire is as much a victim of Francis's experiments as the Griffin family, but his programming prevents him from recognizing his exploitation. Dr. Hartman's medical incompetence isn't genuine stupidity. It's deliberate malpractice designed to cover up the genetic modifications in his patients. Every member of the Griffin family displays physical and psychological traits that would be immediately obvious to any competent physician, but Dr. Hartman consistently fails to notice or investigate these anomalies. Dr. Hartman's medical practice serves as the primary interface between Francis's research program and the subjects. Routine medical appointments provide opportunities to monitor the effects of genetic modifications, administer new treatments, and collect biological samples without arousing suspicion. The families trust Dr. Hartman with their health, never suspecting that he's actively working against their best interests. The most disturbing aspect of Dr. Hartman's involvement is that he genuinely believes he's helping his patients while simultaneously facilitating their exploitation. Francis has convinced Dr. Hartman that the genetic modifications are beneficial medical treatments, not experimental procedures. Dr. Hartman's incompetence isn't an act. It's programmed blindness to the ethical implications of his actions. The town of Quahog itself has been specifically chosen and modified to support Francis's genetic research program. The unusual concentration of bizarre characters and impossible situations isn't coincidental. It's the result of decades of careful population management and environmental manipulation. Every major location in Quahog serves a purpose in the research program. The Drunken Clam provides a controlled social environment for observing subject behavior. The Quahog Mall offers opportunities for psychological testing through consumer behavior analysis. Even the local news station serves as the information control mechanism to prevent subjects from learning about their situation. The most shocking revelation about Quahog is that many of its residents aren't permanent inhabitants, but rotating research subjects brought in for specific experiments. The town's population includes people from around the world who believe they're participating in legitimate research studies, while actually serving as unknowing test subjects for genetic modification programs. Mayor West's apparent insanity isn't a character quirk. It's the result of early genetic modification experiments that damaged his brain. Francis keeps Mayor West in power because his unpredictable behavior provides perfect cover for the unusual events that result from ongoing research activities. No one questions strange occurrences in a town run by an insane mayor. The supernatural and science fiction elements that occasionally appear in Family Guy aren't random cartoon logic. They're leaked information about the true scope of Francis's research program. Time travel, alternate dimensions, and genetic modifications are all real technologies being developed and tested in Quahog under the cover of cartoon impossibility. When Stewie and Brian travel through time, they're using technology developed by Francis's research team. When characters encounter aliens or supernatural beings, they're interacting with other victims of genetic experimentation whose modifications have progressed to extreme levels. The show presents these events as comedy to prevent viewers from recognizing them as documentations of actual scientific research. The most terrifying aspect of this revelation is that Family Guy isn't entirely fictional. Seth MacFarlane has been using the show as a way to reveal information about real genetic experiments while maintaining plausible deniability by presenting the information as comedy. The more ridiculous the situation appears, the more likely it is to contain genuine information about secret research programs. This explains why Family Guy has remained popular despite its apparently random and inconsistent storytelling. Viewers subconsciously recognize the truth hidden within the comedy, creating a psychological response that feels like entertainment but actually represents recognition of suppressed knowledge about human genetic manipulation. The implications of this hidden lore extend far beyond the show itself. If Family Guy is documenting real genetic research, then similar programs might be operating in communities around the world, using entertainment media as cover for revealing their activities. The show's international popularity might be part of a larger program to gradually accustomate global audiences to the reality of human genetic modification. The Griffin family's story isn't ending with the revelation of their experimental nature. It's building toward something much larger. Francis's research program has been preparing for a global expansion of genetic modification, using the Griffin family as proof of concept for technologies that will eventually be applied to entire populations. Stewie's evolution from evil baby to complex character represents the successful completion of the first phase of Francis's program. The next phase involves scaling up the genetic modifications to affect larger groups while maintaining the same level of control and observation that has been perfected through decades of work with the Griffin family. The most shocking aspect of this expansion is that it's already begun. Communities around the world are experiencing increases in unusual behavior, genetic anomalies, and impossible survival rates that mirror the patterns established in Quahog. Family Guy isn't just entertainment. It's the instruction manual for recognizing the signs of genetic modification in your own community. Seth MacFarlane's other shows, American Dad and The Cleveland Show, represent expansions of the same research program into different demographic groups and geographic locations. Each show tests different aspects of genetic modification and social control, using comedy as cover for documenting real experimental results. The interconnected universe of Seth MacFarlane's shows isn't just creative world building. It's evidence of a coordinated research program that spans multiple communities and test populations. Characters who appear in multiple shows aren't just cameos, they're research subjects whose modifications require monitoring across different experimental environments. This hidden lore transforms Family Guy from a simple, animated comedy into something much more significant and disturbing. The show serves as both entertainment and documentation, comedy and confession, fiction and fact. Every episode contains information that viewers are meant to process subconsciously, while consciously dismissing it as cartoon nonsense. The most important aspect of understanding this hidden lore is recognizing that it changes everything about how we interpret not just Family Guy, but all entertainment media. If one show can serve as cover for revealing information about secret research programs, then other shows might be doing the same thing with different types of hidden information. The Griffin family's story continues to unfold with each new episode, gradually revealing more details about the genetic experiments that define their existence, while maintaining the comedic facade that prevents viewers from taking the revelations seriously. The show's longevity isn't just due to its humor, it's due to its function as an ongoing documentary of human genetic research. As we've discovered today, Family Guy contains layers of hidden lore that transform it from simple entertainment into something much more complex and significant. The Griffin family's genetic modifications, Francis's research program, and the town of Quahog's role as an experimental environment create a narrative that extends far beyond what appears on screen. Understanding this hidden lore doesn't ruin the show's entertainment value. It enhances it by providing context for character behaviors and plot developments that otherwise seem random or inconsistent. Every joke becomes a potential clue, every character interaction becomes a data point, and every impossible situation becomes evidence of technologies that officially don't exist. The most important takeaway from exploring Family Guy's hidden lore is the recognition that entertainment media can serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Shows that appear to be simple comedy might be documenting real events. Characters that seem fictional might be based on real people. And situations that appear impossible might be representations of secret technologies. This revelation about Family Guy opens up possibilities for understanding other animated shows, comedy series, and even dramatic programs in new ways. The techniques used to hide information in plain sight through comedy and cartoon logic might be more common than we ever imagined. The Griffin family's story serves as a warning about the potential consequences of genetic modification research conducted without proper oversight or ethical considerations. Their suffering, despite its comedic presentation, represents real human costs of scientific advancement pursued without regard for individual dignity or consent. But their story also offers hope, because understanding the truth about their situation provides the knowledge necessary to recognize and resist similar programs in real life. By learning to see through the comedic facade, we develop the critical thinking skills needed to identify other instances where entertainment media might be used to hide important information. Family Guy will never look the same once you understand its hidden lore. But that's exactly the point. The show challenges viewers to look beyond surface appearances and question the nature of reality itself. In a world where truth is increasingly difficult to distinguish from fiction, Family Guy provides a masterclass in hidden information and the power of comedy to reveal uncomfortable truths. The next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details that don't quite make sense, the character behaviors that seem inconsistent, and the impossible situations that resolve too easily. You might discover that you're not just watching a cartoon, you're witnessing the documentation of one of the most significant secret research programs in human history.